Hey guys, my name is Ryan.
And my name is Miska.
And welcome to Overwatch Central. So recently we did a 6 tips on positioning video. We felt it was a great way to convey a lot of tips and tricks about how to move around the map on certain heroes. The video has not only met with a great response from you guys, but also helped us convey a lot of information in a nice neat format. So as a test, we thought we'd bring you another 6 tips video on building up a strong team in Overwatch, and potentially do more things like this down the line. When people ask what is the best team composition in Overwatch, we struggled for a solid answer. It's a much more situational thing and the outcome always tends to vary. But don't fret, we thought we'd give you 6 tips of ours when it comes to building a strong team in Overwatch.
Our first tip is to balance out your team. Now, this might seem a little bit broad at first, but hear me out. First of all, you want to be aware of how your team is balanced, both before the match starts and during it. Just having one tank and one support on your team may not be enough depending on the hero selected. For example, D.Va can't really solo tank, but Reinhardt can. I'm sure you can think of more examples. This means that you need a broad selection of roles, and you don't want to be hopping between them too much. This will leave the roles unbalanced. So don't tunnel vision and focus too much on yourself, as team synergy is essential to win. Don't value countering a hero over team synergy every single time. You don't want to switch to a different class to get on a hero that can counter an enemy well, only to realize that you now have too many tanks, offense or defense heroes. Correct yourself and other people when you lose team balance, and please don't get upset if other people on your team are giving you team composition tips.
Our second tip would be know where you should be. Each Overwatch character has a role and they work best when positioned correctly and doing their job. Each hero fits into a certain niche on how they play, and this can apply to all forms of heroes. But let's just look at some of the more obvious roles. We have frontline heroes. These are best when sat on or in front of the objective, and they tend to soak the brunt of the enemy charge. These heroes mostly include Soldier, Reinhardt, Zarya and Lucio. Backline harassers are another common role. Winston, Genji, Tracer, D.Va, Reaper all shine when causing issues behind the enemy lines, chasing down high value targets such as supports and snipers. And finally, your backlines. Widow, Hanzo, Bastion, Torb, Junkrat and Zen all perform best when sat back away from the fight and dealing damage from a distance. Incredibly useful for defending and zoning. These are more just guidelines in our eyes than proper rules, but it's important to know where you should be and what you should be doing. You don't want to be frontlining as a Zenyatta, as you'll be taken out with ease, and you don't want to be shooting people from a distance with D.Va, as you just won't do enough damage. Have a think about what your role is within the team and look at the rest of your allies and see what their roles are as well, and make sure that you have a good balance and presence across the map before you run out of spawn.
Our next tip is to try not solo support. I'm sure all of you out there who have played a lot of support know very well about this, so this one's pretty self-explanatory really. But the support role is one of the more limited ones in Overwatch, so you can quickly run out of options. Symmetra, for example, doesn't really count as a support almost. She's more of a defense hero. If you're running a Symmetra, you need a healer alongside her for sure. Zenyatta is in a bit of a different situation where he's definitely a support, just not one that is amazing at healing in particular. Pair him up with a Mercy or Lucio and you're save your team a lot of deaths. So this leaves Mercy and Lucio currently in the support section. These two can sometimes solo support, but pairing them up with another support is recommended. Double Lucio can also be very strong if coordinated correctly.
Our fourth tip would be not to backline too hard. We went over backliners earlier, but they can be narrowed down mainly to all of the defensive heroes apart from Mei. A common issue I see when playing on defense is having a Widowmaker, Junkrat and Torbjorn, for example, on your team. All 3 of these heroes are generally far behind the fights on objectives, picking off people from a distance and providing cover and fire. However, because half of your team much prefer to be away from the fight, it means that when it comes to those tussles on the objectives and on the payload, you're at a disadvantage on the ground. All of these heroes apart from maybe Junkrat suffer when fighting up close, and if their team is full of the likes of Reinhardt, Soldier, Lucio and Zarya, all of those frontline heroes we were also talking about, then they're going to keep overrunning you and the objective.
And the next tip is knowing who you should change and who shouldn't, and obviously knowing what to change to. Overwatch is all about changing heroes mid-game, which makes creating a team composition even more difficult, obviously. You want to make sure you're countering the enemy team's star player, shutting them down and not letting them dominate, but at the same time you don't want to switch out core heroes for your team in attempts to counter the enemy. This is incredibly important to think about in public matches and connects back to our first point with balancing out your team as well. So you need to know which heroes on your team are currently in an okay spot to change and which ones you need for your team structure to not fail. This is something you decide by quickly having a look at the enemy team and finding out which heroes are giving you issues and need to be countered. And then you look at your own team and switch to a counter for that hero, swapping out a friendly hero that is not playing a current counter to the enemy hero or a core hero on your own team. So basically picking a hero that's not important to countering on your team and making sure that is the person that does the swap. Say you're up against a Pharah that is giving you a really hard time. Ideally, you want to swap to a Soldier 76 to try and counter Pharah. You then don't want to swap out a Lucio for that, as he is a very versatile support, but rather a Reaper, as he's not a counter to the Pharah. Obviously this gets very complex very quickly, so try and counter the enemy heroes one at a time, starting with the one giving you the most issues.
And lastly, our final tip is just because it works in the tournament doesn't mean it will work in pugs. The esports scene has started to grow a lot recently, which is fantastic, but it also means that people will start to try and mimic the pros. It's great to watch competitive Overwatch and learn how to play a certain hero better, especially when it comes to positioning, but trying the same hero lineups is far from guaranteed to work. A lot of the lineups run in competitive Overwatch rely on a certain hero consistently playing a hero extremely well. Since most of us aren't as good as the pros and can't consistently play at that level, we're much better off adjusting to our own skill level and with that our own games. It might be fun to try certain hero compositions a bit now and then, and it may even work out in some cases, but generally Overwatch is very dynamic and will change all of the time, even during a single match. And that's it for this time. Thank you very much for watching. Do let us know in the comments if you would like to see more 6 tips videos like this, and we may do our more guidey type videos in this format. It's much easier to break up more intermediate topics into smaller, easy to digest sections, and you all seem to really engage with these kind of videos a lot more. So do tell us whether you like it or not. Also give us your tips on building a strong team in Overwatch in the comments below. Subscribe for daily Overwatch content, and until next time, take care, and we'll see you then.